Hello, friends. Welcome to our channel, History Chronicles. The winds of change were blowing through France, not just in the form of hunger and poverty, but also in the shape of new ideas, ideas that challenged everything that had been accepted for centuries. As the subsistence crisis pushed the people to their limits, something else was simmering beneath the surface, something powerful enough to light the fuse of revolution. These were the ideas of the Enlightenment, philosophies that questioned the divine right of kings, the privileges of the nobility, and the inequality that had long been entrenched in French society. Imagine sitting in a small, dimly lit room in Paris, surrounded by books and pamphlets. You're a young lawyer, or perhaps a shopkeeper, with a thirst for knowledge and a growing sense of injustice about the world around you. You've just finished reading the works of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who argues that all men are born free and equal, that the government should be a social contract between the rulers and the ruled, not a divine mandate handed down by God. His words resonate deeply with you, challenging everything you've been taught to believe. Rousseau's ideas were radical. He questioned the very foundation of the monarchy, suggesting that power should not come from the top down, but from the people themselves. He spoke of the general will, the collective will of the citizens, which should guide the state. If the government failed to serve the people, he argued, it was not just the right, but the duty of the people to overthrow it. But Rousseau was not the only voice stirring the pot. Voltaire, with his sharp wit and biting criticism, attacked the church and the state with equal fervor. He championed freedom of speech, religious tolerance, and the separation of church and state. Voltaire's famous line, "I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it," became a rallying cry for those who sought to challenge the old order. And then there was Montesquieu, whose work, The Spirit of the Laws, introduced the idea of the separation of powers, an idea that would later become a cornerstone of modern democratic governments. Montesquieu argued that to prevent tyranny, power should be divided among different branches of government, executive, legislative, and judicial, each acting as a check on the others. These ideas were not just confined to the salons of Paris or the libraries of the educated elite. They spread like wildfire, reaching even the most remote villages. Pamphlets and books were smuggled in, passed from hand to hand, read aloud in taverns and marketplaces. The printing press, a relatively new invention, played a crucial role in disseminating these revolutionary ideas. What had once been the domain of scholars and philosophers was now becoming common knowledge among the people. The Enlightenment thinkers challenged the status quo in ways that had never been done before. They questioned why a few should live in opulence while the masses suffered in poverty. They asked why one man should be king by birthright while another toiled in the fields, hungry and oppressed. They exposed the hypocrisy of the church, which preached charity and humility, but lived in wealth and power. In the eyes of the common people, these ideas provided a new way of looking at the world. No longer were they willing to accept their suffering as the will of God or their place in the world as unchangeable. They began to see themselves not as subjects, but as citizens, with rights, with a voice, with the power to change their fate. One story that illustrates the power of these ideas involves a group of workers in a small town in southern France. These men had spent their entire lives laboring in the fields, barely scraping by. But one day, they heard a traveling merchant read from a pamphlet by Voltaire. The words struck a chord with them. They began to meet secretly, discussing these new ideas, questioning why they should be subject to the whims of a distant king who cared nothing for their lives. They started to believe that perhaps they too had the right to a better life, to freedom, to equality. These discussions were not without risk. The authorities were well aware of the danger these ideas posed to the established order. Censorship was rampant, and those caught spreading seditious material could face imprisonment or worse. But the ideas were too powerful to be silenced. The more the authorities tried to suppress them, the more they spread. The people, once passive and resigned, were now filled with a new sense of purpose, a new vision of what their world could be. By the time the Estates General was called in 1789, these ideas had taken deep root in the minds of the French people. They were no longer willing to accept their lot in life. They wanted change. The Enlightenment had given them the tools to think critically, to question authority, and to demand their rights. These ideas would soon translate into action as the people rose up to challenge the old order and create a new one in its place. In our next episode, we'll see how this growing discontent led to a pivotal moment in French history, the tennis court oath. We'll explore how the representatives of the Third Estate, inspired by the ideas of the Enlightenment, took a bold stand against the king and the nobility, setting the stage for the revolution to come. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of the French Revolution. Stay tuned for the next episode of History Chronicles. See you next time.